Hello and welcome to Beyond Top 10 Tennis. My name is Dr. Ashley Morgan-Berge and I'm your host. If you're not familiar with my work or would like to learn more about it, head on over to AIMA International, the first tennis lab of its kind worldwide that is centered on delivering top 10 tennis rankings and is 100% backed by science. This season, we're embarking on something new, something fresh, what I've been holding back. Changeover segments will deliver how to beat the best players in the world or how the best players in the world are winning with top 10 to Grand Slam differences. Look, if you want more, that's where my 14 books come into play. So be sure to dive into them and become familiar with AIMA International and the 195 plus previous episodes. Look, it's a new frontier and I'm no longer holding back. So buckle in and enjoy the ride. Welcome to another edition of Beyond Top 10 Tennis. Oh my goodness, today actually marks episode 198. And if you have tuned into our previous episodes, you know we're on that countdown to episode 200 and that 3-year wrap of Beyond Top 10 Tennis. But look, first and foremost, if you've been with us for some time now, thank you so much. We would not be here without you. If you are new, welcome. You now have, 197 previous episodes, oh my goodness, to catch up with. And really quickly, I did share that I made the really tough decision a few weeks ago that we would wrap Beyond Top 10 Tennis up at episode 200. So we are literally only a few weeks away. That said, I'm very confident that I will continue Beyond Top 10 Tennis, but predominantly I'm thinking of a smaller scale. I think it's going to be really difficult to pull me away from the podcast. But I think it may look like something intermittent, whether it's quarterly, every few months, or monthly. We'll see. But I did make the decision. I have made the decision. I am going to stick to it, but I do like the idea of reappearing, giving those updates, but rather than weekly to fortnightly, to extend that. And we'll see if my schedule does allow for that, but look, time will tell. Look, today's episode, we've got two specific ones on the WTA and ATP tours respectively, the Porsche Open, Rouen, and then Barcelona, Munich. WTA, those first two, ATP, the last two. But then also the Madrid draw is out, so both sides. And I think kicking off, the biggest news I did read the past, I'll say couple of days, WTA tour without spoiling any of the results. Vondrousova, something to do with a little bit of a penalty in some way, shape or form for not allowing a drug test to go ahead. But I know there's been some, I will say, discussions on that lately. I believe she was under the weather. It was one of those more invasive tests. And I'm actually going to put my, without knowing the full story, from what I understand, I'll put my full backing behind Vondrousova actually, because I know there's actually been some, I will say, almost misconduct from the anti-doping agency in respect to not allowing, I think, players' privacy. And I know I don't have the full story there, but I wanted to bring that up to caution, I think, the misinformation around those stories, to make sure to do your due diligence in that respect, that it does not mean there was a failed attempt, etc. I do believe it's to do with, it could do with privacy reasons, health reasons, etc., invasion of privacy, and I believe it's along those outlines. So I would say keep that in mind, but that's probably, and obviously we've got the Loris Awards that happened, I believe it was last night. And we had WTA Tours, obviously Sabalenka, wow, she won it for the first time, very exciting. And also Alcaraz won on the ATP Tours side. And I think that's actually very exciting, I think, for tennis in general, to have both women's and men's tours, not just represented, but both winning the respective awards is very, very cool. Obviously, Sinner was in the mix on the ATP Tour side as well. But I do believe Paolini, Anisimova, they attended. I think there could have been one or two other players, Fonseca as well on the ATP Tour, and I think maybe another one or two players as well, but I won't dive into that. That's just I think, let's call that fun, different news. ATP Tour, I think like the biggest news last couple of days, we know Djokovic and Alcaraz are not going to be playing Madrid, for example. And I do believe there are a handful of others that have withdrawn, but we're going to get to that later because there's actually the implications, I will say, are not what they appear. Obviously, we spoke about last week coaching changes with Swiatek, for example. I know there are some other ones underway as well. But what I wanted to really touch on before we dive into the results is the element of changeover segments that I insinuated or suggested at the beginning of today's episode and how the best players in the world are winning. So I really want to highlight that early on today. And what I'm going to focus on is some really strategic play from some of the best players in the world. Not all, but some of. And I think it's quite evident this season, and some seasons it's not that evident, but it's what you can learn. But it also comes with, when you are at the top, I guess a certain level of privilege in a way that you are entitled to for that hard work. And where I'm going is that you get more periods where you can rest. Compared to, say, if you're ranked outside the top 50, let alone top 100, you really need to play week in, week out to fight for those ranking points, etc. But if you are a seasoned player and you've accumulated enough points and you've broken into the top 10, and potentially the season prior you didn't play the event or you performed poorly, so you don't have as many points to defend, for example, you could potentially choose not to play that event the following season. And we're actually seeing that this season. Let's start with the WTA Tour, because this is actually quite interesting. Sabalenka, she has taken the last time, let's say the week off. She hasn't been playing as much. Her schedule has not been that heavy. And I'm going to argue that it's actually a very good strategic move. And we call this, and again, it's in the books, the research, etc. Periodization. So how it's been carefully crafted, especially after the Sunshine Double, where Sabalenka's had enough time to recoup. Flip side, for example, Rybakina's been playing more and more. What's really interesting, though, is Rybakina did not play very well in the first half of last season. So she has so many points, she can actually accumulate rather than defend. And what's really interesting, for example, leading into Madrid, she's only got a handful of points to defend. I think it was, if I just have a quick look, no, we'll get to that later, so because I don't want to deviate too much. I want to say she made second or third round of Madrid last year, compared to, say, the likes of Swiatek, Sabalenka, I think it was Gauff and Svitolina, who made the semi-finals from memory. A lot of points to defend for the top, well, I will say some of the top 10, right? Almost 50% of the top 10. And all of a sudden, Rybakina is actually looking like she could get very, very close to the number one ranking, literally in a matter of weeks. Just hypothetical. If Rybakina played exceptionally on clay and she went really deep in Madrid, followed by Rome, and Sabalenka didn't perform as well, say Sabalenka fell prior to the quarters, round of 16, for example, there is actually a very big likelihood that we could see a switch between 1 and 2 prior to the French Open, which would be huge news. That said, and I want to caution around this, Rybakina has been playing some stellar tennis. since the beginning of the season, or even from the end of last season's WTA finals. And every player is going to have that dip. So we're waiting for that slight dip with Rybakina and to take those breaks like Sabalenka, like Swiatek has, even Gauff, for example, Pegula, top 5, all of them have. So we're waiting for the almost burnout phase. So they're forced to take that rest. So you really want to catch it before that happens. So we're looking at Rybakina catching that before that happens, so then she can peak, ideally come the French Open. At this stage, Sabalenka's primed to potentially peak prior. Interestingly enough, Swiatek and Gauff as well. And we know Gauff's obviously got the title to defend. Sabalenka, a lot of points to defend. Rybakina, not so much though. What's really interesting, and this has historically actually happened to Svitolina, she's secured number 7 in the world. She's very comfortable. She's been playing some exceptional tennis this season and even last season as well. But again, is one of those players that plays a lot, but I'm looking for the breaks as well to give Svitolina the best chance of having a deep run at a Grand Slam. My concern is that if Svitolina plays all the lead-up tournaments and doesn't have enough, I will say, downtime for her body to recoup, to reach that next peak performance, she will fall around, say, round 16 level. She won't have enough in her to maybe have that shot to progress towards, quarter semis of the French, etc. Again, time will tell. Andreeva, for example, let's say she's underperformed so far this season, and then she's starting to really amp that up, playing some really good tennis the last few weeks. So I'm curious to see how that levels out over the coming weeks, and if she peaks just in time for the French Open, because again, points are on the line. That's just an example. Paolini also, we haven't really seen the best of her the last, I'm going to say 6 to 12 months. She doesn't have as many points on the line this season as she did, say, last season. So she's relatively steady inside the top 10, but she still needs to perform. Let's see how she performs, I'll say, in the next few weeks. And if we can look at the data, look at those metrics, and if Paolini actually is primed this season to make a deep run and maybe go all the way, I definitely won't rule her out. But it's similar to Anisimova and the run that she had last season as well. Exceptional, although maybe not so much on the clay, but again, definitely not going to rule Anisimova out. Top 10's really strong. Like Mboko's there. Muchova just sitting just outside. She's had a huge week as well. Benchik, can't rule her out. She was inside the top 10, but it's quite competitive, as you can see. Pegula, look, she's continuously showing up. And then you've got, I'm going to say, almost the wild card is Swiatek. Is she going to make that deep run? Is she going to make the round of 16 semis? Is that new coach-athlete relationship really going to work in her favour? Or is it just too, I will say, early, and she'll have to wait till Wimbledon or maybe US Open for things to click or not? That's going to be really interesting to see how that paves out. So that's just a little bit of an insight on the WTA Tour of how the best players in the world are winning, courtesy of periodization. Now let's flip over now to the ATP Tour, focusing on, again, periodization. And what I think is really interesting is Djokovic. Djokovic has hardly picked his racket up since the Australian Open, and he's withdrawn from Madrid. I'm curious to see if he will play Rome. I'm guessing potentially he's not going to play Rome either, and he'll play the 1 or 2 lead up prior to the French to gauge his level, performance, etc. But that is a masterclass on periodization, if, very big if, that's afforded to you. Interestingly enough, I believe Djokovic fell in the second round last year in Madrid. So that's really important. What that essentially means is Djokovic's ranking is secured. He's not going to dip outside the top 5 just because he's not playing Madrid. So he's really comfortable there. I think it's a different conversation if he made, the semis, finals, etc. And now, how's this? This is a really big one. Alcaraz fell short, Barcelona withdrew, and we'll get to there eventually today, but he's withdrawn from Madrid. And the fun fact here, so what is potentially not anticipated, is Alcaraz did not play Madrid last year, so there is zero consequence for his ranking. So that is, I think, a very big strategic move. Interestingly enough, though, Sinner did not play either. So Zverev was the number 1 seed. Again, Sinner's going to play, which means he has the potential to take an even bigger lead on Alcaraz, which I think is an incredibly smart move, because if Sinner gets that lead, it means that potentially if he doesn't defend as many points at the French as Alcaraz, for example, it won't be as such a hit to his ranking as it would be to Alcaraz's, just for example. So there's all these different scenarios potentially that can play out. But what I thought was really interesting is that Djokovic, Alcaraz, Sinner I'll say 2 of them did not play last year. 1 of them underperformed. 2 of them are not playing, and 1 can take potentially a big push forward in the rankings. That'll be really interesting to see how that does play out in the next 1.5-ish weeks. So that's I'll say a very interesting, I'll say, landscape as well. As far as the other players are concerned inside the top 10, the defending champions are no longer inside the top 10. So you've got, I believe it's Rudd and Draper. Both of those players will take, I think, a significant hit in the rankings. I'm not going to foresee either player having a deep run. Maybe Rudd, there's a big maybe. Look, he's still ranked he's at 15 now as of this week, so when we do get to the rankings. Can Alex make a deep run? Shelton's had a really good week. Can he uphold that new baseline? Is he peaking too soon? I like the odds of Ugo Elisime, for example. He's had a very, I'll say, low-key week, so I want to see how he does on the clay. Same with Alex. Is it his season to make a relatively good clay court run or not? Mazzetti, I think, is going to be potentially dangerous this season. We know, I think it was 2 seasons ago, how well he did at the French. I think it was too early for him, big breakthrough. A more seasoned player now, I think there is big potential. And I think we also forget that as far as Ugo Elisime is concerned, he's only 25 years old. He was a top 10 player, I think, when he was in his teens. And he had that regression rankings-wise, and he's clawed his way back inside the top 10 last season. So there's a few things on play. Look, and Bublik's just outside the top 10, and look, I'm going to say, like, his biggest wins have been on grass, but also he did collect some wins on clay last year, I do believe. So I don't want to write him off either. I think potentially, and you can't write off any player, especially if they're just ranked outside the top 10. I think it's going to be interesting. Look, Kobolli, Rublev, they're making a run. Kobolli really reaching that new peak the past, I'll say, week or 2. So there's a lot in the mix there. But as far as, again, how the best players in the world are winning, ironically, I think the big lesson or take home this week, I hope each and every one of you really grasp onto is the rules around periodization and the power of rest, and how you can essentially implement that into your schedule week in, week out. And that's where I will say my 2 latest releases, my tennis black book to my tennis workbook, for example, are really pivotal in those learnings, the implementation, integration, depending how you want to look at it, but also the other texts as well. So be sure International or Amazon, irrespective of where you're based in the world, the books are available there. All right, today's episode, starting with the WTA Tour first, followed by the ATP Tour. 2 big events we're going to go through before we have a look at implications for Madrid, points to defend, etc. All right, so starting off with the Porsche Grand Prix. It is a 500 event, so keep that in mind. That's why there are a lot of points on the line and why we've seen, I'll say, a bit of a shift in the ranking the past week. All right, I'm going to go through the buys as well, just to keep things uniform. Rybakina was the number 1 seed, so automatically we know that Sabalenka did not play. She's had the week off. Fresh legs for Madrid. All right, so you got Schneider with a win over Porsche, 3-1. Fernandez, very good win over Ayala here, 6-1, 6-4. Really shows when Fernandez does peak and doesn't, but also how Ayala, she's still finding her footing, I think, before she pushes inside to the top 30. Maybe later this season, time will tell. All right, big first round upset. Sonmez over Paolini, 2-2. So I think that's really one to watch this week in Madrid, how Paolini performs, if she is primed for the clay court season or if she's falling off that baseline. She really cemented herself 2 seasons ago at. Swiatek with a bye. Seidman over Tomova, 4-6, 7-6, 6-1. Parks with a win over Nahoa Agui, 4-2. Andreeva over Ostapenko. That's a tough first round, but well done to Andreeva, 5-7, 6-2, 6-4. Alexandrova over Knudsen, 2-2. Noskova over Zhang, 5-7, 6-1, 6-4. Lies over Badosa. That's a tough one. Really good win there for Lies. 2-6, 7-5, 6-4. Really curious to see how Badosa performs, I guess, in the coming weeks. We know she's had that rankings regression, but also we know how well she can play. Svitolina with a bye. Muchova over Sasnovich, 2-4. Mertens over Seidel, 3-4. Samsonova over Ruzic, Love and 4. And you got Gorf with a bye. All right, not too many surprises there. I think Paolini's the biggest surprise. Round of 16, Rybakina over Schneider, 6-3, 6-4. That's a nice, solid win. Fernandez over Sonmez. This is very tight. 6-7, and that was 2-7. 6-1, 7-6, 7-5. Really close to the first and third sets there. Well done, Sonmez, for pushing Fernandez, but again, obviously well done, Layla. Swiatek with the win over Seidman. So if this is Swiatek's first match back in a number of weeks, well, since I will say Miami with that earlier loss, I think it was to Sakari there. All right, 6-2, 6-4. No, I think it was to Lynette. My apologies. So her first win under the guise, we'll say, of her new coach. Look, on paper it looks good, but hold on till we get to the next round. Andreeva over Parks, 7-6, 6-3. Noskova over Alexandrova. Look, that's an upset, but not that surprising. We know Noskova's on the rise. 6-1, 6-1. I'm really curious to see how well Noskova performs in the coming weeks as well, if she has those deep runs or not, because she has been flagged as a potential barrier breaker. If not this season, potentially next. Svitolina over Lies, good win there. But Svitolina, she's been rock solid most of the season, 6-1, 6-love. Muchova over Mertens, that's actually a big win, 1-6, 6-3, 6-love. Gorf over Samsonova, 7-5, 6-1. So that's also Gorf's first match back. I'll say in a week or two. That said, Gorf did perform quite well. Miami, there we go. So that was me thinking, making sure there I did get the right one. All right, quarterfinals. This is where we're seeing the pros and the cons. All right, so Rybakina, as anticipated, over Fernandez, really holding her own. But this scoreline actually says more to me than I think meets the eye. 6-7, 6-4, 7-6, 8-6 in that tiebreak. Well, first of all, well done to Rybakina, but second, that's a really good result for Fernandez. Even though she did fall, that's a really good metric, I think, for Layla on the clay. She came very close to a win over the number 2 player in the world, arguably the second or if not the most informed player so far this season. I think it's neck and neck between Sabalenka and Rybakina at this stage. But that's a very good metric. This one is, I'll say, a little bit surprising, not so much. Keep in mind, it's second match for Swiatek back, but I like this for Andreeva. So Andreeva got the win over Swiatek, but look, 3-6, 6-4, 6-3. What I like already about this is that it's not one-sided, in respect that we were seeing a lot last season, or even this season, where Swiatek won the first set, almost got bageled in the second, and then the third, or it was up and down, where this seems like Swiatek actually held her rhythm throughout the entirety of the match, which I like. That's a good thing. Even though Andreeva obviously got over the line in the second and the third, still relatively close, but obviously Andreeva got those points where it really mattered or counted. I like that a lot for Andreeva, but I won't say there are, say, negatives to take for Swiatek. I think that's a healthy loss. All right, Svitolina over Noskova, similar, 7-6, 7-5, really tight there, and I think Noskova should be really happy with that result. Well done to Svitolina. Muchova with the win over Gauff, but again, very similar, 6-3, 5-7, 6-3. So again, well done to Muchova. That's a huge win over Gauff, but very similar to, I'll say, the Swiatek and Andreeva match. There's not that much in it, and I really like those results for both Gauff and Swiatek respectively, because they've had an extra 2-3 days to rest. I'm curious to see if that's a little bit of an advantage come Madrid. May or may not be, but it really is these micro discrepancies that separate the best players in the world to not. And if you can't win them all, you really need to fine-tune, pinpoint which ones you want to peak at. So these ones were obviously not peaks for those two respective players. Absolutely has been for Rybakina. But look at these results. All right, semi-finals, Rybakina over Andreeva, 7-5, 6-1. So arguably that quarter took a lot out of Andreeva because with how Andreeva's been playing and how Rybakina was pushed to 3 by Fernandez, you could have anticipated Rybakina to be, let's say, a bit worn out from that, didn't have enough recovery potentially, similar to, say, Andreeva. But that's not the case, how Rybakina really amped up her game and Andreeva wasn't able to stay with that. Other semi-final, Muchova got the win over Svitolina, 6-4, 2-6, 6-4. Very good result to see it pushed to 3. Really, look, I think Svitolina potentially could finish, in the next, I'll say 2-3 months inside the top 5 if she keeps this level of play up, or she's definitely should finish the season still inside the top 10. Very good result there for both players. But look, as far as the finals are concerned, it was Rybakina over Muchova, 7-5, 6-1. Other than her match against Fernandez, Rybakina's been really solid. So again, that's why I'm very curious to see if anyone's able to, I'll say, ruffle some feathers in Madrid, if Rybakina's going to fall off her current peak, or if she's established that new baseline. So I can't overstate that enough. That's potentially what we're looking at that has happened this season, and she's really leveled up to almost be on par with Sabalenka's level, and that's a very exciting metric. But also I'm very curious because obviously the two players following, Gauff and Swiatek, so 3 and 4 in the rankings respectively, how their peaks are going, how their baselines have been evolving. And again, we'll have some, I'll say, more answers after Madrid. All right, so Rybakina is the champion for the Porsche Grand Prix. Muchova, well done, making the finals. I think we may very well see Muchova back inside the top 10 potentially. There could be a switch between herself and Mboko in the next couple of weeks, but that will depend on how Mboko performs in Madrid, because again, Mboko does not have points similar to Rybakina to defend in the first half of this season, let alone for the rest of the season other than Montreal, really. So that's going to be a very tricky one, that we could see some other players regress outside the top 10, which we will get to potentially later, but that's a whole other discussion. All right, let's move on to Rouen. All right, so it is, it's a smaller event. It's a 250. For perspective, we've got Kostyuk as the number 1 seed and Sirsteya as the 2nd seed. So let's go quickly through here. All right, Kostyuk over Parry, 1 and 4. McNally over Volynets, we've got a 1-6, 6-1, 6-1. Rakimova over Kialev, 3 and 6. Lee over Kazakina. Look, not an upset. Lee's a 5th seed. Kazakina, former top 10, hasn't played too much this season. I think she was really burnt out. But it'll be interesting to see how Kazakina does perform, if she does finish the season inside the top 20, top 50, or if she's maintains, I guess, her new baseline around that 60 ranking in the world. I think that's around where she currently is at. Scoreline here to Lee, 6-7, 6-2, 6-4. Baptiste over Porsche, 3-6, 7-6, 6-2. Shimonovic over at Frutovitova, 3-5. Salikova over Blinkova, 5-1. Maria's upset Jakimova, the 9th seed, 4-3. Kostyuk over Cheraviva, 6-3, 4-6, 6-2. Podrez over Sloane Stephens, 2-1. Love still seeing Sloane in action. Bulta over Timofeeva, good win there for Bulta, 2-2. Christian over Rakamanja Rajonaha, 2-6, 7-6, 7-5. As always, I apologise for the mispronunciation of names. I do try my best. Bonda over Tan, 6-2, 4-6, 6 love. Olingen-Kova over Tega, and that's an upset there, 6-3, 4-6, 6-4. Recall how well Tega had been tracking, I think, the last couple of weeks. Wang over Paquet, 4-6, 6-4, 6-3, and Sir Stayer over Ferro, 6-3, 6-7, 7-6. That's a tough one. Bad luck there for Ferro, but well done to Sir Stayer. All right, on to the round of 16. We've got Kostyuk over McNally, 2-6, 6-2, 6-1. Lee over Rakimova, 4-6, 6-2, 6-3. Shimonovic has upset Baptiste, the 4th seed, 6-3, 5-7, 6-3. Maria over Salikova, 3-2. Podrez has upset the 7th seed, Kostyuk, 7-6, 4-6, 6-4. Bulta's upset the 3rd seed, Christian, 7-6, 4-6, 6-1. Bondar over Olienkova, 6 love, 4-6, 6 love. That is a brutal scoreline there. And so Stayer with win over Wang. She's up 5-3. That unfortunately Wang did have to retire. All right, on to the quarterfinals. We do have 3 seeds left in play. Ouch. And 2 seeds here. Kostyuk, the number 1 seed, over Lee, the 5th seed. 6 love, 6-7, 6-3. Maria over Shimonovic, 7-6, 6-2. Bulta did lose to Podrez, so Podrez 6-4, 6-1 over Bulta. And Sir Stay with a win over Bonda, 7-6, 6-2. Semi-finals, number 1 and 2 are still in play. But look at this. Kostyuk with the win over Maria, 6-3, 6 love. Podrez got a walkover against the 2nd seed, Sir Stayer. So let's see, hopefully Sir Stayer is healthy for Madrid, which means I believe this is the first time it was a all-Ukrainian final on the WTA Tour, which was really exciting for Ukrainian tennis. Kostyuk and Podrez, Kostyuk did get the win over Podrez, 6-3, 6-4, but that scoreline, I think, it's nice and close for both players, especially Podrez, but well done for Kostyuk coming out on top. Although, again, keep in mind it was a 250. It is pushing Kostyuk back up the rankings, but it will, again, be interesting to see how Kostyuk does play against, I will say, other fellow top 30 players come Madrid. All right, let's have a sneak peek at Madrid, then the rankings, before we head on over to the ATP Tour. What I wanted to draw attention to was last season. So last season in Madrid, what happened? And I think I did insinuate most of it earlier. Look, Sabalenka was in action. Rybakina was in action. But let me find, I think, the biggest upset. All right, look. Really quickly, when I'm looking at those earlier 1st and 2nd rounds, what am I seeing that, could ruffle some feathers? I'm seeing that Anisimova lost in the 2nd round, which means Anisimova does not have points to defend this year. Also seeing Rybakina lost to Kostyuk in the 2nd round. So Rybakina does not have points to defend, or not that many points to defend, right? Zhang, she lost in the 2nd round. Keep in mind that all these seeded players got a bye, so it's really their first matches. Again, Losso Zhang actually does not have points to lose. Pagula lost in the 3rd round. So it doesn't have many points to defend either. That's really interesting. Just going down one by one, Kazatkina lost in the 3rd. So she's got some points to defend, not too much, but also granted of her rankings regression. Be interesting to see what happens. Rybakina, she lost in the third round to Svitolina. So again, only a couple of points to defend, not too many. They're the biggest ones. Paolini only made it to the third round, so she had a big upset last year against Sakari in the third round. So similar to Rybakina from that perspective. Everyone else, or all players so far, I'll say have progressed past those earlier rounds. Fernandez lost in the second round, so that'll be interesting again to see what happens, especially granted that she is in form. Look, Vekic has pushed past the third round. Navarro fell in the third round. That's going to be interesting considering Vekic's ranking and if she's going to progress or there's going to be a regression. That's going to be interesting. Joint lost in the second round, so she's got a lot of points potentially to earn up her sleeve. Ostapenko lost in the second round. That's going to be interesting also to see if she can track. And Iala lost in the first, or we'll say second round against Swiatek. That'll be interesting to see as well. All right, let's push onwards then. Again, keeping in mind, this is last season. So we're really focusing on last season's results, what players pushed through, which players, we'll say, did not. And just little things we can keep an eye on this coming week. All right, so let's focus on round of 16 through. I'm going to roll off these names. Sabalenka, Stearns, Kostyuk, Potapova, Uchijama, Alexandrova, Svitolina, Sakari, Andreeva, Starabatseva, Benchik, Gorf, Keys, Vekic, Schneider, and Swiatek. It'll be very interesting when we review this next week, how many of these players make the round of 16. I'm going to say, or go out on a limb here, less than 50% of these players will, going off historical data, which means there'll be a big shift in the rankings. After pushing through to, we'll say, the quarter stage, there's not that, well, we've got, I'll say, the anticipated players, but not all of them. Unseeded is Uchijama. She's the one unseeded player. Let's see if she can keep those points or not. But look, Sabalenka is there, Kostyuk's there, and look, they had a really close match last year. Andreeva, Gorf, Keys and Swiatek. So I think Keys is potentially an anomaly. We haven't seen much of her, but maybe she will peak in time for Madrid. Maybe not. Let's see what happens. We haven't seen, I'll say, her best tennis so far this season. But look, a lot on the line for the semi-finals players. So Sabalenka, Svitolina, Gorf, and Swiatek. So Sabalenka pushed to the finals, and so did Gorf. So Swiatek fell short last year in the semis, and so did Svitolina. But essentially, all four players have a hell of a lot of points to defend, and obviously Sabalenka, Gorf. But the biggest names missing, Rybakina and Pegula, when you're considering the top five. And I already touched on Anna Samova with the points that potentially she can gain as well. Paolini has points to gain as well. There's a lot in the mix. Even Muchova has a lot of points to gain as well. And that's going to be really interesting. There definitely potentially could be a shuffle inside the top five, but even inside the top 10 after the coming week, will we see a newcomer? Will we see a non-ranked player like Uchijama or not? So there's a lot of, I think, key metrics there we really can pay attention to. All right, biggest, I think, when we're looking, now this is the draw. This is the live draw that's come out. Potentially Uchijama will face Sabalenka in the round, or the 32, so third round. However, she is looking at, if she gets through her first round match, to play, say, Christian. So look, potentially, so either way, it potentially could be Sabalenka or Uchijama, but not both of those players will get through. Look at this, Boisson is back in action. We have not seen her in a number of weeks. She's got Stearns first round. The winner of that match will play Sabalenka. So I think that's quite interesting. Buskova's in Sabalenka's section. And she is flagged to, let's see what happens. So she's on a track for the third round with Osaka. Again, haven't seen Osaka for some time. It'll be interesting to see if that rest period has been serving her game as well. So there's a couple of players who really have been leveraging periodization in their favor, and that's why I'm very curious now when we get these 1,000 events coming around for the players who have, I'll say, carefully crafted their schedule to see what the outcome is, or if the benefits obviously do pay off. Schneider Benchik on course for a third round. Baptiste, she's been playing some really good tennis this season, has really bumped up the rankings. She's on course for Paolini in the third round. Let's see if Paolini can get over that third round hurdle. Quietly rooting for her to progress like it was, let's say, 2 seasons ago. How's this? Swiatek has the winner of Kazakhina, and Kazakhina's looks like she's a player qualifier. That's actually quite tough, considering that potentially Swiatek has a former top 10 player, this time last year, top 10. In the second round. But also noteworthy, Swiatek is in Sabalenka's half. That's very important to note. And obviously Paolini's section as well. Swiatek potentially Lee, third round. Fernandez has Jovic potentially third round. Fernandez, though, may play Badosa if she gets through her first round encounter. Andreeva, she's on course to play Kalinskaya third round. That could be interesting as well. And this, keep in mind, this is still the top half of the draw. Wang Svitolina, potentially third round. So that is the bottom. So that is the end of the top half of the draw. That's a lot, considering both Svitolina, Paolini, Swiatek, Sabalenka, Uchijama, 3 of the 4 semi-finalists last season are in the top half of the draw, with only Gauff obviously in the bottom then. And we've got Rybakina in action. Pegula, all right, so again, she's got a lot of points to gain here. Pegula potentially will play Kostyuk in the third round. That could be rather interesting, given how well Kostyuk's just played the past week on the clay. Also to gauge how well Pegula's playing. Keep in mind she won Charleston the week before, and that is a clay court event. All right, Torson's on course for Mboko. That, wow, third round. I think that might be the most exciting third round clash, only because we know both of these players really are vying for that Mboko's already top 10, but Torson, she's on track as well, similar to Noskova. I put Noskova and Torson in the same boat, that both players are really that next gen pushing through on the cusp, pending on, I'll say, a current top 10 player regressing. All right, and then Noskova's got Samsonova, third round. Steyer, so she is back in action after she did withdraw the past week, and Gauff for third round. I'm liking this draw for Gauff. I'm thinking good things potentially, but I do say that, and Anasimova's in action. She's got Buska potentially third round. Potential first or second round clash with the winner of Yastremska and Sierra. And I know Yastremska can cause some trouble, but again, that'll be a very good match to gauge Anasimova's level on the clay. Mertens and Sakari third round. That said, Iala's got a qualifier first up, and the winner of that match has Mertens. Keys has Ostapenko. That'll be a very good match if both those players, they get through to the third round. Zheng, remembering she doesn't have many points to defend, but she's on course for Rybakina. Now, I do believe it was a few weeks ago where Zheng pushed Sabalenka. I want to say it was a relatively tight match, but still Sabalenka played well. It'll be interesting to gauge Zheng's level of play against Rybakina there. That's interesting. That said, Zheng does have the winner of Kennan and Kruger. Rybakina, winner of Rus and Ruzic. I would argue potentially an easier bottom half over top half, but that's just the layout of the draw. So I'm looking forward to already to see what these results are in the coming weeks. That'll be, I think, quite interesting with a number of implications, especially come Rome and the French Open. All right, over to the rankings. I don't want to hark on the rankings too much, but we will look at I'll say the biggest movers of the past week. So starting at 100, and we do have Seidel. So she's actually 13-point regression the past week. And she starts starts at 100. Edovic, welcome to the top 100, or potentially back up 8 places to 96th in the world. Uchijama has taken actually a big hit, an 8-point regression to 94 in the world. So 12 months ago, obviously career high, making the semi-finals in Madrid. Let's see what happens in the coming week and a half. Otherwise, potentially Uchijama is at a risk of regressing outside the top 100. That'll be a bit of an ouch there. All right, going quickly through the rankings, Parks up 11 places to 84 in the world. A lot of movement this week, but I'll focus on, I'll say the biggest movement. Roos, she's back 10 places to 71. A lot of movement here. Sonme is up 12 places to 67 in the world. Just for perspective, Bekic is up 1 to 66. She did bump outside, I think, almost top 100, but then she's back in now. Bulta's up 3 to 61. Just some small movement going on. Maria's up 9 to 54. Your Stremsis, she's steady at 49, just to put some of those matches in perspective. And Boisson steady at 46, or she's just back 2 there. But keep in mind, she really has not played much this season. All right, inside the top 40, and you've got Ostapenko's taken a bit of a hit this week, an 18-point regression. So she's at 40 in the world. Let's see if she can have a good week in Madrid and get back inside the top 30 and potentially be seeded again at the French. Otherwise, she definitely is going to be a dark horse come the French. Sakari's at 37, Zheng at 36, just for perspective. Baptiste has a very, very good run. She keeps climbing. She's up 3 more places to 32. At this stage, she looks like she could be seeded for the first time at a Grand Slam if she maintains, I guess, her hold on her current ranking. All right, top 30. Look, Navarro's just back 1 at 28. She has a bit of a slide recently, but again, I'm really hoping for good things come the clay court season and she finds the level she had, not necessarily last season, but the season before, where she really became that barrier breaker and broken into the top 10. Kostyuk's up 5 places, so she's back to 23, but keeping in mind she has been a top 20 player comfortably, has had a bit of a regression the past season. Look, as far as the top 20 is concerned, there's only actually a little bit of movement here. Look, Alexandrova's back 1 to 14, Duskova's up 1 to 13, Benchik is back 1 to 12, and Muchova's up 1 to 11. And there's not much between them. So 14 and 13, there's just over less than 100 points there. And 11 and 12, there's a couple of hundreds, so about 250 points separating the two of them, roughly. Though Mboko is steady at 10, there's around 200 points separating Muchova from Mboko. So, which means at Madrid, anything really can happen. We potentially will see a shift in the rankings there. Top 10, we've had a little bit of a switch here, 8 to 9. So Palin is back 1 to 9. Andreeva's up 1 to 8. Look, there's less than 30 points separating those two in the rankings. Just under 200 points separating Palin from Moko, which really means separating Muchova from, I'll say, comfortably being inside the top 10 is about those 500 points. And given she doesn't have that many points to defend in Madrid, highly likely if she maintains, I'll say, her baseline from the Porsche Grand Prix, if she does maintain that, we will see her re-enter the top 10, Mboko outside the top 10, and potentially you've got Palini or Andreeva more susceptible to regressing if they underperform. If Palini pushes past that 3rd round, adds there, that's a good thing. Andreeva's, I do believe, got points to defend, not as many as well. So Andreeva's actually similar boat to Palini with as many points as she can defend. Svitolina, though, has a lot of points to defend. So we could see a potential regression there, but still should maintain her top 10 ranking. But look, Anisimova, she's got points to gain. Pegula's got points to gain. Rybakina's got points to gain. It's Sabalenka, Gorf, and Swiatek, so obviously inside the top 5 with the pressure, plus Svitolina. So that's actually, there's a lot of implications here. Whereas ATP Tour, there's really not many implications at all because, we will get to that, but no top 10 player made the finals. So that's an interesting discussion we are about to have. All right, so that wraps up the WTA Tour for this week. Let's head on over to the ATP Tour. All right, we're going to start with Barcelona. We'll go Barcelona, Munich, and then we're going to dive into Madrid, then the rankings. Today's episode is actually a lot longer than anticipated, but that's okay. I think I'm trying to make the most of these last episodes, and you can see why I am equally torn from that perspective. All right, let's dive into Barcelona. It is a 500 event. I believe both events this week on the ATP Tour are both 500s, whereas WTA Tour was a 500 and a 250. So just keep that in mind. All right, Alcaraz, number one seed. First round win over Vertanen, 6-4, 6-2. Macaque over Baez, 2-6, 6-4, 6-1. Sonego over Martinez, 6-2, 2-6, 6-4. Rublev over Navone, 6-4, 7-5. Diminor over Offner, 7-6, 6-4. Just a fun fact here, Diminor is actually the third seed, and we don't normally see that. All right, Medvedev got the win over Tungaletti, 7-5, 6-4. Borges over Manarino, 3-4. Ouch, look at this. Echeverry with the win over Draper, 8th seed, 3-6, 6-3, 4-1. Draper did have to retire. Curious to see if Draper is going to play Madrid because he does have a lot of points to defend there. Norrie got the win over Wawrinka, 6-4, 6-7, 6-4. Quinn over Opelka, 7-5, 7-6. Joda over Menard, that's an upset there, 6-1, 6-2. Another upset will go Kobolli over Kakanakov, 3-4. Keeping in mind, Kakanakov was inside the top 10 briefly at the end of last season, slightly regressed outside this season so far. All right, Phils, he's done a run. Good win over Adame, 4-6, 6-4, 7-6. That was actually 9-7 tiebreak in the third. Nakashima over Cerundolo, 3-5. Mute, my apologies, over Boost, 4-4. Mazzetti, the second seed, with a win over Landaluce, 7-5, 6-2. No buys in the first round. All right, so round of 16. So as maybe potentially a number of you know, Alcaraz actually did withdraw from his round of 16 match, so his second match. So Macaque did get a walkover there. Rublev over Sonego, 2-3. A big upset here. Medvedev over Diminor, 3-4. So let's see how Alex recoups come Madrid. Borges over Echeverry, 6-3, 7-6. Norrie with the win over Quinn, 6-3, 4-6, 6-4. Joda over Ugo Carabelli, 3-3. Phils, boy, he's got some momentum on his side lately. Over Nakashima, 2-3. Mazzetti over Mute, 6-3, 6-4. All right, quarterfinals now. Ramping it up. We've got Rublev, who's actually started to perform quite good this season, especially compared to last season, I would argue. 4-3 over Macaque. Medvedev has upset Borges. Keeping in mind, Medvedev had to qualify, 7-6, 6-2. Joda with the wild card has upset the 7 seed Norrie, 3-2. And Phils has upset Mazzetti, 6-3, 6-4. Again, with his momentum, since coming back, because keeping in mind, I think since around the French Open, he had to withdraw. He's had an injury since then, has made his comeback, I think, after the Australian Open, so only the last 2 months, I think it is, and he's really been playing some good tennis. All right, semi-finals here. We've got Rublev with the win over Medvedev, 3-6, 6-2, 6-2, and then Phils over Joda, 3-6, 6-2, 6-2. So you got Phils who took out, I'll say, the second seed. Rublev in action. I think it's not his first tour final, I think, this season, but very good result for Rublev nonetheless. Maybe it is actually, but Phils, too good for Rublev. 6-2, 7-6. Doesn't surprise me because Phils, he is on that comeback. He's been inside the top 15, or I think 15 was his high point before he had to be sidelined. Really good things, and I think if Phils plays, or his schedule, his periodization chart work is really smart the next couple of weeks. Hopefully he sets himself up for a deep run at the French. He definitely has that, especially with his home crowd, but that'll be really interesting. But there's a lot of, I think, planning I know that goes into that. Hopefully Phil's teams has that down packed. If not, head on over to AM International. Your resource hub is there. But Rublev, that's actually a good result for him making the finals there. And that's where we'll see a bit of a push in his rankings when we get there this week. All right, on to Munich, or Munich, depending on how you prefer to pronounce it. Again, keeping in mind it is a 500 event. For perspective, Zverev is the number 1 seed here, Shelton as the 2nd seed. All right, starting from the top, Zverev over Kekmanovic, 6-3, 3-6, 7-6. Diallo over Sachko, 1-2. Vandersen Schulp over Huesler, 6-3. Surundulo over Nagal, 2-2. Cobolli over Derrua, 4-5. Berge over Topo, 1-4. Kopriva over Engel, 6-3, 5-7, 6-2. We've got Darderi over Zhang, 7-6, 3-6, 6-1. Shapovalov, good win there over Grekenspor, the 8th seed, 6-4, 3-6, 6-2. Seen a little bit of a regression in the last few weeks of Shapovalov, so that's a good push forward for him. Marizan over Tsitsipas, 3-6, 7-6, 6-3. That's another early loss for Tsitsipas. We've seen a bit of regression in his ranking again this week. It's a bit upsetting seeing a player go through that, going through a former top 10 player, then taking, I guess, hit after hit after hit. I really hope he gets it right with his coaching team. Clearly, it's not working at this stage. Again, if you're listening to Stefanos, head on over to AM International. As always, we are here to help. All right, Altamar over Silic, 2-3. This is actually a surprise upset. Molcan over Bublik, the 3rd seed, 6-4, 6-2. Again, I'm curious to see how Bublik performs come Madrid. Rintinek over Mitchelson, 3-3. Fonseca, good win over Tabillo, 7-6, 6-3. Blocks over Halfman, 7-6, 6-2. And Shelton with a good win over Nava, 7-6, 3-6, 6-3. That's actually very tight there, but well done Shelton to push through. Whew. All right, round of 16. Zverev over Diallo. Now, remember these two. They played at the Australian Open to the point where I looked at that match, I watched it, and I thought Diallo is on the radar this season, even though Zverev got the win. But much more convincing here. Zverev over Diallo, 6-1, 6-2. Surundolo over Vandersen Schulp, 6-3, 6-love. Good win there for Surundolo. Cobolli over Bergs, 2-3. Kopriva's upset Darderi there, 2-6, 6-4, 6-1. Shapovalov, good win over Marizan, 7-6, 6-2. Molken's upset Altamar, 6-4, 7-6. That tiebreak though, 12-10. Fonseca's upset Rindinek, 3-2. And Shelton, good win over Block, 6-4, 7-6. But that tiebreak was close. That was 10-8. All right, quarterfinals. Zverev over the 5th seed Cerundolo, 5-7, 6-love, 6-2. Cobolli over Kopriva, 6-3, 6-2. Moltke in the qualifiers upset Shapovalov, 4-4. And Shelton over Fonseca, 6-3, 3-6, 6-3. Look, all credit to Fonseca to pushing a top 10 player to 3. Not the first time I think we've seen that. So we know good things are in store for Fonseca, potentially top 20 come end of season, but I have shared that before. But again, well done Shelton pushing through. All right, semi-finals. We do have 3 seeds plus the qualifier in Molcam. Zverev Cobolli, the 4th seed, has upset Zverev for the first time in his career, 6-3, 6-3. And Shelton with a win over Molcan, 3-4. Wow. I did read the news. There was a lot there. There was a big win for Cobolli, although Shelton did get the best or better of him in the final. 6-2, 7-5 to Shelton over Cobolli. And I think I read that Shelton, or an American's first win on clay, so first title in clay, I think in more than a decade, I do believe. It could be longer than that, but I'm a bit, I don't have the... I'll say snippet in front of me, so I'll say that's what I did read, but I think it falls somewhere in between. But look, no, well done Shelton. That's really good news there. Again, let's see how deep he can go in Madrid, and also let's see if Cobolli can maintain that momentum. Curious again to see how Zverev picks up in Madrid, if he, I guess, fills that void that Djokovic and Alcaraz are going to leave, if he pushes through to a final or not, that'll be really interesting, I think, for all four players. With Molcan making the semis, if he, has a good run in Madrid, if he qualifies or not, if we see him more in action, because again, he is the anomaly there, but if he's a repeat performer, that is very good news. So he is one, I guess, to keep an eye on as each and every week. All right, so they're the results for Munich. So let's now head on over to Madrid. Bit excited about this. I've already shared earlier in today's episode the players out of action. But what I want to draw attention to is last season. So the 2025 results. So confirming again that Djokovic fell in the second round last year. Macaque also fell second round last year. Diallo got through. That's interesting. But I think that these were the biggest ones. And Rouen fell early, which actually is good because I do believe Rouen is back in action or maybe in Madrid. So that could be interesting to pay attention to. No other surprises there. In the earlier rounds. I'm just going to check any more surprises. Similar, look, Poprin fell early, first round. Listen, mate, actually fell in the second round. So he does have points to get on his side. Phil's fell second round. More points he can collect on his side. Hercax fell second round, so he won't, probably we won't see too much of a regression. Teen fell first round, actually. So that's actually good news, I think, for Teen. That is very interesting. Okay, let's look forward, again, keeping in mind last year's results, any of the anomalies or early exits we may anticipate, and players who have the most potentially to collect. Look, Rublev fell in the third round. So with how his points have been going or how he's played the past week, that's potentially a good thing. Fonseca fell early. Again, potentially points on his side. They're the biggest when we're looking at up till the third round. Just looking at the final list. Look, Shelton, there we go. Shelton fell in the third round. Let's see. Again, obviously, he does have points to gain. But similar to Felix, if he can push inside the top five, potentially with a deep run. Or if he maintains the form of the past week. Other players, we've got Tsitsipas fell in the third round. That may work in his favour since he's on a bit of a regression slide. Bublik fell in the round of 16. So he does have some points to defend. All right, they're the biggest names, I think. Let's push forward further. So we're looking at the round of 16. I just want to run off a number of names. They're just a bit scattered over the day. So round of 16, Menzik and Bublik. So I've already touched on one of them. Tiafoe Analdi, Fritz Rudd, Zverev Surundolo, Medvedev Nakashima, and then we have Dimitrov Diallo, Diminor and Mazzetti, Draper and Paul all made the round of 16 last year. So that'll be interesting. Again, similar to the WTA Tour, I would anticipate a 50% churn rate, potentially less on the ATP Tour actually to make the round of 16 this season in Madrid. That'll be really interesting to review in the next, 1.5-ish fortnight. That's big news. So when you're looking at the quarterfinals, we had Rudd over Medvedev, Surundolo over Menzik, Mazzetti over Diallo, and Draper over Analdi. So look, a lot of the big names are missing. Semi-finals were Draper, Mazzetti, Rudd, Surundolo. So only one player, so that's Mazzetti, is currently inside the top 10. And Rudd and Draper Rudd won. So he's got a lot of points on the line, and Draper was runner-up. That was in 3. Rudd's susceptible if he doesn't defend that to, I'll say, regressing outside the top 20. So yeah, there's a lot there, but more so players that are not inside the top 10 had deep runs. All right, on to this year's draw. All right, so starting with Sinner. Sinner's looking at Diallo in the third round. That could be interesting considering Diallo has a number of points to defend. So we may see, even though he's seated here in Madrid, potentially if Sinner is successful, we will see Diallo have a bit of a bump, so regression in the rankings considering how well he did last season. Norrie and Paul look like they will play third round, although Norrie looks like he's got McCack in the second round, and McCack has been playing some good tennis. Rublev and Rindenek for the third round. Fonseca, that's a tough one for Alex de Minaur. That'll be interesting to see as well. Shelton's got a Chevrolet third round. Phil's has Vachereau. Lehecka has Michelson, Greekenspor, Mazzetti. That said, Mazzetti's got the winner of Hercax and a lucky loser. Could be interesting there, depending how well Hercax is playing. Bublik and Mute for the third round. Davidovich Fokina, haven't seen him lately, will be playing Rudd. That is a tough one. Really rooting for Rudd, a 12th seed, given how many points he's got to defend. But Davidovich Fokina, we all know how well he plays also on the clay. Surandulo will have Darderi in the third round. Nakashima, Agor Olisame for the third round. Again, curious to see how far Felix can really push it. Medvedev will play, looks like Shapovalov, third round. Teen, Cobolli, although look, Teen could have Dimitrov in the second round. Dimitrov's got a handful of points to defend. Really rooting for Dimitrov to have a good run, to really help him push back, at least inside the top 30 would be great for him. Kakanakov, Menzik, although Menzik's got the winner of Poprin and a qualifier. Let's see how well Alexei is playing. Humbert, Zarev's got the winner though of Borges and Avon. We know Borges can be dangerous though. You really need to give it potentially to Zarev. So that's it actually for Madrid there. That is the draw, what all those third round potential lineups are looking like. I'm curious to see how Madrid pans out, because the players we would have anticipated to defend those points, like the WTA Tour, it's just not the same. ATP Tour is wide open as far as points are concerned, and unfortunately a lot of players ranked outside the top 10 who performed quite well last season in Madrid, they're just not there this season. So that's why percentage-wise we potentially won't anticipate for them to make as deeper runs. So we will see a number of slides, I think, outside the top 10 to that 50 range. But again, it'll be interesting when we review the results in, a week and a half, in a fortnight's time. All right, let's head on over to the rankings and the results the past week. Starting at 100, Wu. So Wu is back inside the top 100, up 2 places to 100 in the world. Focusing on the big movers again. All right, we've got Kipson. He's up 6 places to 90 in the world. Nothing big. Shevchenko, he's back 7 to 82 in the world. The biggest hit, actually, when you're looking at it at this ranking range, is Tsitsipas. A 13-point regression. He's now at 80 in the world. So Madrid seeding or the draw must have come out prior to this big regression. It's really brutal for Tsitsipas. Rooting for him to get a bit of a push. That uptick in his game, we saw it last season, with Sakari, how big her regression was until she found her footing again. And she's made those inroads. Tsitsipas absolutely can do it, but he really needs to find that shift, I think, in his team, in his game. Okay, we got Collignon back 6 to 71 in the world. Medvedev, big push here, 20-point progression to 68 in the world. Kopriva's up 12 to 66. Kekanovic is back 7 to 65. Baez is back 7 to 64. Hafman's back 9 to 60. A couple of big jumps. Ugo Carabelli's up 7 to 57 in the world. All right, so top 50, Matazan, so he's back 8 to 50 in the world. Adame's back 6 to 47. A lot more, I will say, movement this week on the ATP tour over the WTA tour as far as the bigger jumps are concerned. Jodas up 13 to 42 in the world. Makak's back up 6 to 41. Rune's taken a bit of a hit, 12-point regression to 39 in the world. I did notice, however, when we were going through Madrid, I did not see Rune's name, which means potentially there could be a bit of a regression, but not too much. Let's see if he's on the cards or if he does play Rome. Diallo just up 1 to 36. Potentially, if he does lose points, there is going to be a bit of a regression. All right, Fonseca's actually up 4, so he's at 31. If he holds, he will be seeded, it looks like, for the French Open. So that'll be really interesting how he performs in the coming weeks. Odds are that he will be. For perspective, Draper is at 28 in the world. So keeping in mind that if he does not make the finals, he will take a bit of a hit. Absolutely will be pushed outside the top 30. So that'll be interesting. It'll be the first time he's been pushed outside the top 30 since essentially he ascended inside the top 30. He must have been about, let's give it 18 months ago. So that's something to keep an eye on. Look, Fields is up 5 places to 25. Look, I think his career high was around 14, 13 in the world. Again, only 21 years of age. He's absolutely a potential barrier breaker. This season, I'm not going to be surprised if he pushes inside the top 15, probably next season top 10. But look, anything really, given how well he's been playing, I don't want to write him off the cards to become a barrier breaker by the end of the season with how well he's playing. Similar to what we saw from Ogor Elisame last season. Absolutely. He is one of only a handful of players that could make that type of run. All right. As far as the top 20 is concerned, just a little bit of movement. Tiafoe's back inside the top 20 at 19. Kakankov's back 2 to 16. Rudd's back 3 to 15. For perspective, if Rudd does not defend his title, he will be bumped outside the top 20, but probably still maintain a ranking inside the top 30. Lehecka is just back 1 to 14, but Cobolli is the one up 3 to 13, and Rublev's up 3 to 12. I think that's Rublev's highest ranking so far this season, actually, after his regression outside the top 10. I think it was about just before the end of last season, we did see that shift happen. Bublik steady at 11. Just over, I'll say, 100 points separating Bublik from Medvedev, who is at 10. But then you've got about 150 points between Medvedev and Musetti. So it's actually a bit of a tight squeeze. And Dimanor's back 1 to 8. Fritz is up 1 to 7. But look how close this is. There's only a bit over 100 between Musetti and Alex. And between Dimanor and Fritz, you've literally got less than 30 points. That's interesting there. Really close, the squeeze there. And between Fritz and Shelton, a bit over 100 points. And again, between Shelton and Ogor Elisame, you've got 30 points separating. So the second top 5, let's call it, of the top 10, that's actually quite significant. The jump between Ogor Elisame, though, and Djokovic, you've got just over 500 points. But look, in Madrid, absolutely, if Felix does perform well, he absolutely could displace Djokovic there. We could see a bit of a switch, potentially. But any of those other 5 players inside the top 10 potentially could do that. But look, as far as, let's say, the other players are concerned with Zverev, you're looking at 1,000-point gap. He's pretty comfortable at 3, although never say never. 7,000 points plus between Zverev and Alcaraz. And then you do have that extra 1,000 point. Actually, no, it's actually less than 1,000 points. My apologies. You've got just over 300 points there. So 400 points between Alcaraz and Sinner. So it is tight. Sinner has the potential to extend that to over 1,000 points. And I think if he does that, or should he do that, I think that will really work in his favour, or give him a little bit of a cushion in the months ahead, especially maybe ease a little bit of pressure for the rest of the clay court season. That's going to be actually quite interesting to see. All right, so we have gone over all the rankings. We've gone over Barcelona, Munich, Madrid. I'm really curious to see what happens again in the next 1 week, 1.5 weeks. It falls just under 2 weeks, I do believe. Ranking updates will not happen for another fortnight because Madrid is the centre of focus for the tour. So we will come back to you for episode 199 prior to Madrid, prior to Rome. So we will have a wrap and be in time to review Rome as well. But we do have 2 more episodes, oh my goodness, in front of us. But let's finish today's episode. It's a long one. You may or may not hear a bark or 2 in there. I have done my best to edit that out. But look, thank you so much for listening. To grab your copy of any one of my 14 books, you can find them on AMA International or Amazon, so irrespective where you're based in the world. If any comments or questions, head to AMA or Topic Thread or leave comments directly on YouTube or Spotify. And look, to interact with Beyond Top 10 Tennis, catch up on our blogs or sign up to my newsletter, head to AMA International, and remember to check out Pink Octopus Books to Spruik. And look, if you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, like, share, and all of the above. Beyond Top 10 Tennis exists for you, so please consider sharing us with those you know near and far. And look, if you're serious about heading towards the top 10 or want to know what you're missing to secure that main Grand Slam or more, don't be shy. Come and say hi. All right. On that note, thank you so much for listening. I am so incredibly grateful. I'm your host, Dr. Ashley Morgan Berge, and this is Beyond Top 10 Tennis, and I'll see you next time.